Well, hello and welcome back. So, in this podcast, I'm going to address the idea of or the concept of rational choice theory and comparative politics, and show you an example, a couple of examples of how we can use rational choice theory to understand political outcomes. And I'll use also an example of the NBA. Now, rational choice theory is an idea that comes out of the sort of the behavioralist revolution in social sciences that argues that individuals, that we can understand political phenomena as the result of sort of the aggregated outcome of individuals acting in a particular way and in a consistent way, based on their what are called their preferences and their beliefs about the world. So, what does that mean? Well, and moreover, what's important is that rational choice theory is sort of a competitor to ideas about culture, and culture being a framework through which we can which we can analyze and understand comparative politics. So I'll look at culture more closely in my next podcast. But let's talk about rational choice theory. So, anyways, so rational choice theory is a way to analyze politics scientifically. It's a way to move, as I said, beyond description and judgment to explanation and analysis. Move beyond the who, when, where, and what to the why and the how. Okay, answer the why questions. So, instrumental rationality. Instrumental rationality is the idea that that individuals act in accord with their preferences and beliefs. So they have preferences and beliefs, and I'll talk a lot about what these are. Okay, so preferences are, as Shepsle and Bonchek say, are part of an individual's internal world. Okay, beliefs are affected by the external world. So this is an important concept distinction, and we'll talk about this in a second. So what are preferences? Well, they're, as we all know, they're the sort of the wants and needs and desires of individuals. They can either be natural or socially acquired. Okay. They're given a priority. In other words, we know prior to sort of or trying to analyze a decision, we understand what an individual's wants, needs, or desires are prior to the analysis. Okay, and we, for the sake of simplicity, we assume that they don't change in the short term. So, rational choice theorists are fond of saying we take people as we see them. Okay. In other words, we know that individuals have certain preferences and certain needs, and we start out from that assumption. Okay. Beliefs are, on the other hand, affected by the nature of the external world. Okay. In other words, they affect the way that people express their preferences either through certainty or uncertainty. Now, so we can be certain about, and what this means essentially is how certain are we that a particular behavior will lead to a distinct outcome. Okay, we can be certain about it, or we can be uncertain. Okay, there's no direct sort of mapping of behaviors to outcomes. Okay, now there are two versions of distinct versions of uncertainty, which we'll get to in a second. But for the time being, let's just say that the idea of beliefs is how certain are we that we can match a particular behavior with an outcome. So, for instance, let's assume that you have the behavior is voting for John McCain. Okay, how certain are you that that vote for John McCain will lead to him becoming the president? Okay, well, that depends a lot on the nature of the external world and what others are doing. Okay, and of course that also is affected by, for instance, public opinion polls, etc. Okay, we'll get to this in more in depth in a second. All right. Rationality is a form of methodological individualism, as I say in the book. I won't talk about that too much. Okay. All right. So instrumental rationality is essentially based on the idea that people combine their beliefs about the external environment and their preferences about the things in that environment in a consistent manner. Okay. So from the rational choice perspective, people act in a consistent manner. Well, what does that mean, to act in a consistent manner? It has actually a specific meaning in the logic of rational choice. Okay. So essentially, rational choice theory is a way of explaining individual behavior based on a couple of premises. One is comparability or completeness. And all this means is that for a potential set of alternatives, okay, all potential set of alternatives are said to be comparable if for any two alternatives, say x and y, either x is preferred to y is preferred to x, or or an individual is indifferent between x and y. That's all that this algebraic stuff means. Okay, and transitivity is the other sort of important property. And that means that preference relations are said to be transitive if for any three, let's assume possible alternatives, x, y, and z, if x is preferred to y and y is preferred to z, then transitive preference would be that you would prefer x to z. Okay. So here's an example. So if I prefer Hilary Duff's music to Lindsay Lohan's and Lindsay Lohan's to Christina Aguilera's, then if I'm rational and my preferences are transitive, I must prefer Hilary Duff's music to Christina. Okay. All right. So if I's preferences satisfy both comparability and transitivity, then I, the individual, is said to possess a preference ordering. You have a preference ordering. Okay. And the rational choice essentially is simply the top of the ordering, right? So so preferences that permit rational choice are ordering principles. So they are personal. Okay, these ordering principles are personal in that each person may have a different way of ordering preferences. You may, for some inexplicable reason, prefer Christina Aguilera's music to Hilary Duff's, but I won't grade you down for it. They allow comparisons of alternatives, pairs at a time, and they're internally consistent. Okay, so this is what a good set of ordering principles. These are the factors that they have. Okay. So here's an example from the case of Governor Weld in the book. Governor Weld, who was the governor of Massachusetts at the time, had the following alternatives. Okay, in 1996. Okay, alternative X is a term as a United States senator. Okay, which would have enhanced his prospects to be on the national ticket in 1996. Okay, Y. He had the alternative of being a second term as governor, okay, and then Z, being out of politics in the near term. So these are sort of the three alternatives, okay, the three sort of preferences that he had. So based on his ambitions, right, and what we knew about him back then, we can be certain that his preference ordering, remember that, was X, Y, and Z. So he preferred X to Y, which he preferred to Z. Okay, but and this is where the whole sort of this is where the whole sort of rational choice comes in. This is where the kind of the analysis comes in and the logic. The fact is that he couldn't choose directly from X, Y, and Z. Okay, his behavior, right, and his behavior in each of these situations was to run for office. Okay, and remember, and we have to. That's conceptually distinct from the outcome, which is a term as senator. Okay, he can't simply choose to be senator, right? That's a result of the interaction of voters and campaigns. He can choose to either run for senator or not. That's what he can choose. Okay, so that's his behavioral. That's part of his behavioral set, or his choice of potential behaviors. Okay, now because he can't choose to become senator, right? He has, well, let's just talk about his behavioral options once again. What are his behavioral options? What can he do himself? Well, he can do one of two things. He can run for governor or run for senator. Okay, so that's what he can do. He can either run for governor or run for senator. That's it. Okay, he can't become governor, right, on his own. He has a choice. He can run for governor and he can run for senator. Okay, so how do Weld's behavioral options, that is, run for governor and run for senator, map onto his preference ordering? Remember his preference ordering back here, X, Y, Z? Okay, well, if he runs for governor, then the outcome is Y. That means he becomes governor. Why? Well, because we know from his popularity and polling data that he was virtually certain to become governor. So remember going back to certainty and uncertainty back then. I said I talk a little bit more about that. Well, if he runs for governor, then he is literally almost certain to become the governor. So outcome Y. That's the mapping of this preference of his behavior onto the preference. Okay, if he runs for senator, right, then he's not certain of becoming the senator. Rather, what he's faced with is what's called a lottery over outcome X, which is becoming